Molly and Doc, thanks for being with us today. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Scott, for having us today. Dr. Weinstein and I have truly been looking forward to this. And I'm going to start, just do sort of an introduction of some of the issues in our profession and in light of everything that is going on right now, our current environment, and this time of uncertainty, as we're sort of referring to it broadly. And also, just to let you all know that we are available. We're available to any and all of you to assist in any way. So it's that you see Dr. Weinstein, that you see me, that you get to know us a little bit, so that if there should ever be a need, you feel comfortable reaching out to us. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Weinstein. I'm a lawyer. He's a clinician. I think he will speak to you more about the different ways to take care of ourselves and different ways to sort of tackle all of these unknowns, and some of the things that have been working for people we've been in close contact with over the past couple of months, and some of the things that have not. So we encourage you, as Scott Fingerhut said, to email your questions. I will field them. Mr. Fingerhut will also field them. We really would love to hear from you. The more we hear from you, the better it will be for us. And I want to first by saying thank you again to Scott Fingerhut for inviting us to do this, and for the criminal law section of the Florida Bar. The Florida Bar, as many of you probably have seen especially over these past couple of years, have really done a tremendous job focusing on attorney wellness and the lawyers' assistants. We from the Florida Bar, we're funded. We've been around since 1986, and it's been really a pleasure to collaborate with the bar on a lot of these wellness issues. And it's really just, and this, I think for my own, my own background as a civil rights attorney, I've done a lot of prison work, and I've been a litigator for about 20 years, and only in working full-time at FLA for a few years now. This population, all of you, are particularly close to my heart as well, because there are issues specific to criminal law, and I know some of you may have jumped onto who are in the civil arenas too, but we, lawyers, we work with human beings, and we really, we're really just so glad to have you here today. So thank you, Scott Fingerhut, for inviting us, and thank you to the Florida Bar for helping coordinate. And so I'll get started with sort of a brief introduction, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Weinstein. So as I mentioned before, it's not just criminal attorneys, attorneys in general. We are susceptible to stress, and on a regular day, stress and mental health issues and substance use issues under normal circumstances. We are the most resilient folks out there, but also quite vulnerable in some ways. And there was a study, and the whole point of checking in with all of you today, and a lot of the wellness efforts, is we really want to reach people before things get bad, before people enter the disciplinary system and the, or in a mental health crisis. We really want to focus on how can we take care of ourselves now to prevent some of these other things from happening, and to be happier people, happier attorneys. It's again, it's what we do. It's not who we are, but especially in the realm of criminal law, it's a very fine line. So back in 2016, the Betty Ford, many of you have probably heard of that. It's a very famous treatment center, and the American Bar Association and the Hazelden Foundation, they did a study of attorneys, which was one of the most comprehensive studies done. And it really broke down some of the impairment type issues in our profession. And just by way of example, and statistics we always have to be a little bit careful with, because they're generally a little lower than the facts. But they found that about 28% of attorneys reported struggling with depression. about 20% with anxiety, and also reported that 33% of attorneys are problem drinkers, and that is even more common within the first 10 years of practice. And I'm not telling you, the point of this day is not to scare any of you, because none of us are doomed. The whole reason we are doing this is so we can work on these things together and to avoid some of these bigger issues, especially in times right now where things are so uncertain. So, but those are some of the statistics. Our profession does lend itself to extreme, extreme stress, and that can result in a lot of these different more serious concerns. But Florida Lawyers Assistants, our whole goal is there are, I'll just tell you all very briefly, many of you may be familiar with FLA already, so I won't get into a lot of detail, but for those of you who are not, or who may not come into contact with us, we are, as I mentioned before, we've been around since the 80s. We are mandated by the Florida Supreme Court to assist attorneys who have mental health and substance use issues. And there are 3 ways that people come to us. And the third way is what I want to spend most of our time talking about. The first way is through the discipline system. You all have read the Florida Bar News, and you can see on there that some of the disciplinary actions, people are sent to Florida Lawyers Assistants. That's one issue that is a part of what we do. Another way that people come to us is through the application process, and oftentimes law students or applicants will come to us if they have to answer in the affirmative to any of the questions about mental health or substance use, and know that the Florida Board of Bar Examiners is going to either call them in for a hearing or question them about it. They'll get involved with us voluntarily, show that they can do what they need to do, whether it be get substance use treatment, mental health treatment, and prove that, while applying for the bar, yes, I may have these issues in my past, but I have taken care of it. I've been proactive about it, and FLA is helping me document that I've done so. So those are our 2 ways. The third way, which is our favorite way, and Dr. Weinstein and I, part of the reason we like to address folks like you all, the third way that people come to us is voluntarily. Strictly voluntarily. You or any of your colleagues can call us for any reason at all, completely confidentially. It doesn't get reported to the bar. It doesn't get reported to employers. We do work with those entities with authorization from the client themselves, but people can call us, and you don't even have to give your name. You can call as an anonymous attorney. We are always available. Dr. Scott Weinstein and I, we have 2 other attorneys that are on staff full-time. We're always available. So, and people can call us for any reason at all. It doesn't have to be a diagnosed DSM-5. I guess we're at 5 now. That's more Dr. Weinstein's department than mine. A diagnosed DSM-5 diagnosis. It doesn't have to be a diagnosed substance use disorder. People call us because they are having trouble at work. They're going through a contentious divorce and need a referral to a therapist. Now, what we're here to talk to you about now, we have been calls from, I am so isolated. I don't know how to, I've not been able to leave my house, and I'm trying to navigate this whole Zoom world, and I'm completely, I'm coming apart. Or people have had the opposite experience. I'm home now with my significant other and my children, and I'm trying to homeschool and lawyer and take care of elderly parents. And again, these are the things that we can talk to you about. It doesn't have to be a diagnosed issue. We want people to call us for any reason at all, because the whole point is to prevent, to prevent things from getting worse. And we are human beings before we're lawyers, and we want to be, ethical, competent, effective lawyers, but we also want to be happy human beings. And sometimes, especially right now, when we're all trying to navigate these new waters, it's very difficult. the lines, I know the boundaries are very, Dr. Weinstein will talk a little bit more about that. The lines are getting crossed in terms of when we're at work and when we're not at work, as if that wasn't difficult enough before with the invention of, I know when I first started practicing, cell phones were a new thing, and or not a thing at all. And so that has really changed everything. And now, with all of these changes in our environment, especially our legal environment, courts being closed except for essential hearings, it's been a very difficult time, and that's what we want to talk to all of you about and help you with. And I want to, before I turn it over to Dr. Weinstein, I also wanted to share with you all that Florida Lawyers Assistants is, I have, as I mentioned before, I'm the assistant director of FLA. I've been there since 2017, but back in more than a decade ago, I was actually a client myself. And I have, as I mentioned, as Scott Fingerhut mentioned, I am an attorney in Illinois and New York as well. I haven't practiced in New York, I'm licensed there, but I went to law school in Chicago. I practiced there in the civil rights field for quite a few years, and then I moved down here. And while I was in law school and sort of, early in my years of practice, I'm one of those lawyers who loves being a lawyer. I've always loved the practice of law. I have never made a lot of money in the practice of law, but I've been more of a legal aid civil rights lawyer, but I have always loved it. And one of the things that started happening as my legal career was progressing, so was my alcoholism. And in 2009, I myself had found a position to voluntarily call Florida Lawyers Assistants and say, look, I can't stop, I need help. I've been to treatment. I'm going to go on to get licensed in Florida. And, how will I navigate this? I'm an attorney. We're not supposed to have these problems. And at the time, Michael Cohen, he was our previous director, who has since passed away in 2017. He answered the phone. He told me his story. He said, I too am in recovery, and we will do this together. And I share this with you just so you know that this organization actually, that I am a product of this organization and having been one of those people that made the call. So I share that just in the event that any of you or your colleagues ever feel so inclined that you feel comfortable doing so, because it was a very difficult call to make, and it was probably the best call I made in terms of my career, my recovery, and my life. So I have a big place in my heart for FLA, in addition to working there. And now, during this pandemic, it has really given people a chance to reflect on what is important. And Dr. Weinstein and I have really, we have tried to speak to as many people, as many attorneys, judges and law students as well, but I think we have mostly attorneys on the call today, to let you know that we are human, we are not always perfect, and that there are ways to navigate this and check in with each other and deal with issues of isolation and lawyering remotely and all of these things that we have to navigate with a profession that is stressful even on a normal day. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Weinstein, and as I mentioned before, the most important thing about today's call, in addition to giving you some ideas about how to help navigate this, is that we're available and that we are always on the other end of the phone should you need to reach out to either of us for any reason. So it was really important that you meet both of us on Zoom today for that very reason as well. And I'm going to turn it over to my fine colleague, Dr. Weinstein. And he's a clinical psychologist, as Mr. Fingerhut mentioned. He's a wonderful therapist. He runs a lot of groups. He has a lot of activities that he's working on right now, while people are working remotely, he's really here for all of us. And I love the way that Mr. Fingerhut set this up, because we'll have a chance to check back in with all of you and take your questions and listen to your concerns in about in a couple of weeks. So it's a day at a time in terms of how we're navigating all of this. For those of us in recovery, we are used to working. We're used to living a day at a time. And I think most human beings, we strive to live a day at a time, but it is very difficult, especially in our profession. So I am so glad that you're all here today. I am just so grateful to the criminal law section of the Florida Bar for putting this together. And we want to be here for you in any way that we can. So Dr. Weinstein, I turn it over to you, and I'll be keeping an eye on some of the email questions that come in, so I may jump in again.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Molly. And Scott, thank you for this wonderful opportunity to speak to the criminal law section. And Molly kind of set it up in a way that I'm really happy to hear, because we've been following the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic for a while now. We are personally in our offices shut down since March 17th. And we've been working remotely, and it's been a mixed blessing. It's been a place of safety for all of us, and also an opportunity for us to explore how we can help the profession in a very unique way. We've gone remote with all our support, all our contacts, and the groups that we run on a regular basis throughout the state are working beautifully remotely, and people continue to reach out. And as a result of the amazing impact that this has had on people, and I say amazing because it's been fascinating to hear all the responses and all the reactions to what's happened. Some people have an overwhelmingly high stress reaction to it. They're shut in, they're lonely, their whole routine is upside down. And some people have found a remarkable resurgence of discovering who they are. And I'll talk about that in more detail in a few minutes. But stress is an interesting animal, because stress can be a positive and negative factor in our lives. You know, when people think of the term stress, we usually think it's not a good thing. How do we reduce it? How do we eliminate it from our world? But I'm going to tell you that there are ways that stress does work for us, and we can turn it around to make it an ally as opposed to an adversary in our world. When we think about the idea of stress, the profession that you've chosen to be part of, it has an inherently high level of stress for most people. And again, Molly quoted the study from the ABA and the Hazelton Foundation. And again, the numbers, I think, really do not speak to the level of impact that the kind of work you do has on people. I think people are notoriously poor reporters of things they don't want people to know about. But yet we found a remarkably high occurrence of depression, more so in the early years, which kind of shocked most people when they read through the study, and a high level of substance use, which we kind of know, but it was interesting to see the validation of it, and it gave the profession, those of us who want to help the profession, some idea of how to readdress some of our efforts and how to be more of an assistance to the profession at large. I've been working at FLA for going on 16 years now, and I've kind of watched an evolution in the profession in Florida over those years. We originally started out with the idea that, yeah, there may be some other issues other than substance use affecting the population, to finding out now it's clearly a very big part of the how to help and how to deal with lawyers and judges throughout the state. There's been some very tragic consequences of mental health issues not being addressed adequately, or just the fact that mental health concerns can lead to a tragic ending, and there's been a number of very prominent suicides throughout the state that we have been sadly made aware of, and you know, suicide is a fact of life for many professions, and the legal profession seems to have a higher incidence than some. So we are acutely aware of trying to get to the point where we can prevent as many as we can. And we're working very hard on that, and working with all avenues in all parts of the bar, you know, to see if we can, you know, figure out some other sources and other means to help these people before they meet a tragic end. That being said, there's a lot of really positive things that have gone on, and a lot of positive things that we are very happy to be part of. In fact, finding that more people are reaching out to us voluntarily, as Molly mentioned earlier, and that excites me no end, because if people feel that it's a safe call or a safe email or a safe text, then there's a better chance that they're going to get the help they need rather than hiding it. We've dealt with the issue of stigma, and stigma has been thrown around the profession for a long time, especially with mental health and substance use issues. And as a psychologist, I've been battling that topic for as long as I've been working as a psychologist. The idea that something that generally people can't see unless it gets towards the end stage, especially with substance use matters. But generally we can't see stress from the outside. We can't see depression from the outside unless it gets real severe. And by that time, it's sometimes too late to intervene. And we are much more comfortable and much happier when people say, you know, my life is starting to go in the wrong direction. I'm starting to not fire on all cylinders like I used to. And when they reach out, we can say, first of all, and one of my opening lines is welcome back to the human race. Because one of the things that I found in my many years of working with the legal profession is that somehow humanity has been first trained out in law school and then drummed out in the practice of the profession, because it's a battle 24/7 often. And when you get into a battle mode, you have to shut down what I like to call our right brain functioning, okay? The part that feels and all the emotions that go along with being human. And we're on, we press our got to get the job done, got to have a good outcome, have to protect our clients, have to get a good, have to get a good result. And oftentimes we shut down all that goes along with the struggles and stress of practicing law. So again, welcome back to the human race for those of you who have been checked out for a while. And I mean that in the most loving of terms, because this presentation really talks about the human impact of what's happening to us. We're not going to talk about the actual practice of law as much as the impact of things that are often out of our control. And speaking of out of control, this pandemic hit us like a ton of bricks. This is a once in a lifetime event that affected every part of every society around the world. This is a global issue. And none of us prepared for it. None of us even anticipated what could possibly go down. But it's impacted our world very, very acutely. With the shutdown, with the isolation, with the change in every way we deal with our day-to-day business. And the fear of, is it going to go away, and if so, when? Some people, initially told me they were trying to equate it to the hurricanes that hit Florida. And we're real good about dealing with hurricanes. We know they're coming. We watch them on the map. They do their thing, and then the aftermath, and we know how to clean up. This is something we didn't see on the map. No one told us it was coming. It's still here, and we don't know when it's going away. And when it goes away, what does going away mean? So the unknown is a great source of stress for everybody. When we're trying to do our jobs, and when you're in court, you kind of want to have a little idea where you're going with the case, even though sometimes the case can get turned upside down on you. But the bottom line is you kind of know the routine. You know when you meet with your clients, you know the questions to ask. You anticipate maybe what the other side is going to present, and the judges, how they're going to rule or oversee the case. Again, some newness comes into the world and some surprises, but by and large, you kind of know what you do. You get up in the morning and you go to work and you do your thing. Now, getting up in the morning and go to work has a whole new meaning. We get up in the morning and we go to work from our bedroom to our dining room, or go to work from our bedroom to our living room. Or some of us, we still work in our bedroom when we're going to work. So the issue of boundaries has been affected tremendously. And understanding where our private life ends and begins, and where our work life ends and begins. And let alone our public life, because we're not interacting with the public as much as we were. So this pandemic has shaken our world on so many levels. Molly and I have been very fortunate to go around to meet with a number of large organizations and state organizations. We most recently did a very long run with the PD's office in Miami and the state attorney's office in Miami. And what I mean by long run, they asked us back for a repeat visit because so many of their staff had questions and concerns and wanted to know what they might be able to deal with this uncertainty and total, almost devastation of their lives in some ways. And we've heard some amazing resilience from the staff in those organizations. Some people found that they had a balcony in their home that they'd never used before, and now that's their office, which is a great thing. But up until that point, the balcony was just there for a brief visit. Other people found out that they can work in the total chaos of, as Molly mentioned earlier, homeschooling 2 or 3 of their kids who have to be online while they're online doing their thing with their clients. And maybe there's some other relatives running around the house and they have the dogs barking or the cats doing their thing, or in my case, I have a very loud parrot that is thankfully being very quiet for us right now. And how to juggle all that and live a life. And then the other thing is, when do we shut it off? One of the, I think, more surprising responses that we've gotten is that people are working harder now and longer days working from home and working remotely than they ever had going to an office. And that's because in a lot of ways, they don't know when to shut things down. And what's their work area is visible to them in many cases throughout the day. So even when they close down the office for the day, quote unquote, they go into the kitchen and remnants of their office is just a glance over their shoulder. And then of course we've got the dreaded cell phones, and we've got the dreaded beeps and the sounds and the computers going off. And what used to be, able to just shut down from the office and go away, we're not able to do that as much anymore. The other thing I heard that was quite interesting for me is that people are missing traffic jams. And I said, what? And fact of the matter is, getting in the car and spending the 20 to 45 hour drive to and from the office gave them a time to disconnect from the workday. Gave them a chance to shut it down and not have to be worried because they're dealing with the traffic. Now, you would think the traffic was crazy and stressful enough, but I've heard time and time again people say, while I miss the traffic, I don't miss being in the traffic. I really miss being in the time that I had with the traffic. So trying to find ways of somehow mimicking or doing that kind of behavior in a way that lets you disconnect from the work at home. Because if you don't, then we deal with more, possibly difficult outcomes, more stress, potential burnout from the job, which you up until recently may have loved. And that would be a tragic end to this whole thing and be very unfair from a result from this pandemic impacting the world the way it has. So as we've explored this and as we've looked at the concept of this pandemic and what it's done to us, again, we talk about the idea of stress, and we have all these definitions of stress, but it's basically how our body responds to what we believe is real or imagined threat. Okay, and again, the pandemic is a real threat. We can't see it, but we see the impact. The TV is constantly showing us numbers that are just building and building in terms of folks we lose, people that are lost locally and around the world. And the impact of this is millions and millions of people around the world who have been impacted by this. And in the United States, I think we hit 1.5 million cases as of today, or give or take. In Florida, we're humming along at a 2,000 plus cases, plus hundreds and hundreds of deaths. And again, we look over our shoulders. Who's going to be next? Do we know anybody? Have we heard of anybody that we know of who's been affected by this? And so dealing with this new phenomenon increases our level of stress tremendously. And we try to ignore it. We try to walk away from it. But again, with all the other reminders of what this has done in our lives, vis-a-vis our workload, our work ethic, our workplace, it's hard to walk away from this and take a break from this. And as we get stressed and stress builds up, if we don't have any way to dissipate the stress, it has physiological impacts on us, and people start saying, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to go to work, I don't want to do anything. And again, ultimately, some people say, I don't want to live this way anymore. And we want to make sure that this is not an option for anybody. And that's why Molly and I feel very strongly that we are blessed to have these opportunities to speak in front of organizations like yours, because if we can just alert you and maybe touch a part that you've been wondering about what's happening, and give you the impetus to either reach out for help or try to do something to overcome what you're experiencing, then we believe we've done our job. And we love what we do. I really do love what I do. I love to be here to impart information and to help and to give you a sense of hope. And hope is a big part of alleviating stress. Hope is something that, some of us even take for granted, and some of us don't even deal with it because our lives are just going along. But now I've heard so many people say, I hope this is over someday. I hope we get through this. I hope it doesn't impact me or my family or my friends. And so we're going to try to help you find some places of hope and try to find some positivity in this experience that you're going through, so that you can report on your checkup in a couple of weeks that you were successful in doing that. And or if you struggled, we'd like to know where the struggle was. And if we can give you some input, and if you can get some input from some of your colleagues, because a lot of what we've done is is using the input that we get from attorneys that we've spoken in front of and judges that we speak with, and we're going to be speaking with even paralegals at some point in the near future, because this affects every level of the profession, legal profession in Florida. And we've gotten some really good input and from those folks who have tried different things. Some are very creative, some are just matter of fact, and depending on what works for you, there's really not one size fits all answer for this. I wish there was. Well, maybe I wish there was. Maybe I don't wish there was, because that would be kind of boring, I think. If everybody had the same solution set, that wouldn't be so wonderful. But there are a lot of good things that we're learning, and a lot of good things that you can take away from not just what we're going to say, hopefully, but what you hear from your friends and colleagues and family members. So let me go back a little bit and talk about what our hopes are, okay? We want to make this very, very useful and beneficial for you, and say that we spent 90 minutes with Molly Paris and Scott Weinstein, and we walked away with something valuable. Could be one thing, could be two or three things, but we want this to be valuable, okay? I'm going to go reiterate, because I see the messages popping up on my screen, but if anyone has a question, please don't hesitate to ask them, because we like to respond to them, and we want to make sure that we in some way tailor this to those of you who are here with us. And if you find that something that you wondered about or expected or had anticipation about was not being met or needs to be clarified, or we talk more about it, please don't hesitate to put those questions out. Apparently they're going to be anonymous, so you don't have to worry about someone saying, aha, I know that guy again, or that woman answering, asking the question. It's all going to be anonymous, and we will do our best to try to address them. But in terms of getting this going forward to hope, like I said, this pandemic hit us like nothing we've ever experienced. And for the first, couple of weeks, people said, okay, we'll just hunker down. That's a term we all know in Florida. We hunker down for a little bit, we stay safe, and we are going to be okay. And then 2 weeks led to 3 weeks, led to a month, led to 6 weeks, led to where we are today. We're 8 weeks, at least for the most part, that we've really done anything very different. And who knows what the next 8 weeks is going to be. And so what that uncertainty, it creates a whole bunch of psychological and emotional reactions. Okay, I know that most people are trying to maintain a practice. Some people's practices are not doing well, and others are just booming as a result of the pandemic. And then again, I don't know where anyone in this room or this presentation lies, but those of you who are doing better than ever, that's great, but also the stress that comes along with being overwhelmed with a lot of work. That's a downside of having too much going on your plate. And those of you who are wondering, when the next phone call is going to come in, or the next request for your services are going to come in, then we're going to do you're going to be wondering, and the stress is going to be, very, very uncomfortable and building. So those are some of the challenges in terms of this completely different world that we're in, and how we handle those challenges are really going to determine, how we're going to come out the other side. So as far as that's concerned, one of the things that I want to share with you is that when you're feeling stressed, what do we do? How do we handle times when it feels like things are closing in, or we're just not, we're not focused the way we used to focus. We're not being able to get our thoughts together. Our sleep might be impacted. Our eating habits may have changed. So there are certain ways that we know to deal with stress, and I'm sure some of you have heard this before. Some general techniques is, exercising when we can. Okay, a lot of people take exercise for granted, but and again, some people can't exercise the way they used to. The gyms are closed for the most part, and the parks I think are starting to open, but up until that time, people would do some work, some exercise in parks. But just simple things like walking safely, around your neighborhood or so, taking a walk along the beachfront, although I'm not sure where so many beaches are still kind of closed, but just getting out and exercising. That would be one way of trying to reduce our level of stress and our level of discomfort. We talk about relaxation techniques. The nouveau term is mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. For those of you who may not have heard about that, it's a concept that really challenges us to stay present in our moment, as opposed to worrying about what's going to happen hours, days, or months from now, or regretting what we've done in the past. Mindfulness is a very interesting way and a very useful way of taking control of our emotional lives. Okay? It allows us to recognize that, hey, we're having a feeling or a thought right now, and we're going to let that feeling or thought just come into our awareness and deal with that feeling and thought. And it's not going to make a difference in terms of the overall life expectancy, but right now we're going to attend to it. And when we attend to our feelings and thoughts, we're giving ourselves some validation. Okay? And when we validate ourselves, it becomes a very empowering experience for people, rather than just pushing away and trying to ignore what's happening around us. Because as we do that, the unfortunate outcome is we start worrying more. We start, dreading what might happen again, or looking back and say, well, why didn't I deal with that when I had a chance? And now it's coming to really impact me otherwise. So here we are, we're facing this pandemic, and we have questions of what's going to happen, how is it going to end, when's it going to end? And
Dr. Scott, can I interrupt you for one moment?
Sure.
We have a question from the audience, and I wanted to bring it up before we moved away from the mindfulness topic as well. The question is, as you were starting to do, can you give us some practical tips for alleviating anxiety and improving focus? And you were starting to touch on that, and exercising, taking breaks, things like that. But can you give us maybe a few examples of mindfulness as well? Because I know that that's one of the tips that you talk about quite a bit with folks that we're addressing.
Absolutely, and yeah, it sort of was talking around that right now, but in terms of when we're talking about mindfulness, some people do what we call mindfulness meditation, or taking a moment to sit back and just start breathing. And it's almost like a relaxation technique, but it's more focused on being aware as opposed to disconnecting. So if we sit back in our chairs, we can do it with our eyes closed, and we just breathe, in through our nose and out through our mouth. And we just take an inventory of where we are at the moment, what's happening to us. Is our breathing faster than normal? Are we hearing things? Is our mind racing and we can't slow it down? Those are what we need to be aware of, so we can start taking control back over that stuff. Because if we have a racing mind and it's overwhelming us, then it's going to get away from us like a runaway train. So again, sitting back in our chairs, and everybody can try this. Just sit back and close your eyes and just very, very, fully take a breath in through your nose and exhale through our mouth. Okay, and we do that very slowly and fully because we don't want to hyperventilate, and that's happened to me, by the way. So I'll warn you not to do that when I first learned this. But just breathe through your nose, in through your nose, and out through your mouth. And as you're listening to my voice, you might be distracted, or you might tune into something else. You might hear some birds on the outside chirping, or you might hear a car going by the home or the office where you're sitting right now. You might hear some other noise in the background. That's okay, but try to just attend to it for a second and then go back to your breathing, and try to re-anchor yourself or re-ground yourself in that moment, so that you can say, okay, for this time I can do this. I'm aware of things, but I also want to take some control and take some time to really regenerate and relax in the moment. So that would be one example of how mindfulness can be practiced. And mindfulness is a whole concept, again, of thinking about what's happening now rather than what could happen sometime in our future. And again, the dreaded past and all the regrets that we have in our lives. So mindfulness is a concept that's not just grounded in the meditation process, it's grounded in just allowing ourselves to refocus, because a lot of times when we're stressed, we're not stressed about what's happening immediately, we're stressed about what's going to happen. We have a meeting coming up, we missed something, I could have done better on a case, I'm anticipating a call from this, or I'm anticipating an outcome, rather than saying, okay, right now I'm sitting in my office, right now I have some control over my world, and right now I'm not going to be impacted by the worries of the present, of the past and the future. Okay, that would be one really effective way of explaining the concept of mindfulness to you all. Okay, in terms of other techniques that we've talked about, again, the relaxation breathing is even more than, different than the mindfulness. And I've done this for the better part of 30 years of my life. It's something that once you learn and master, you can take with you and no one can take it away from you. It's a really wonderful tool to help you when you do get stressed out, because I'm pretty sure we all do. I know I still do. And, but I know that immediately I can call upon this technique and really give myself a chance to calm down, especially before a presentation like this, or if I'm going to meet with some, quote unquote important people. My anxiety might creep up a little bit. And so what I'll do, again, it goes along with the breathing I told you, but it's much more involved in terms of breathing through our nose and exhaling through the mouth, but also it's a series of tension and release in our body. So if we try breathing with our, through our nose, with our mouth, with our eyes closed and our mouth like that. We go, demonstrate that. And then if you just squeeze your right fist as tightly as you can. And as you're breathing, continue to squeeze, and you can feel the tension building up in that hand. And what you're now focusing on is your breathing, but you're aware that there's tension going on and building in your hand. And after a few moments, if you start releasing your fingers and opening your hand slowly and resting it at your side, okay, the immediate difference between what you experience with that tension and now that relaxation feeling in your hand can be remarkable for a lot of people. And what happens is it's a metaphor for how our mind gets all wound up and all balled up. If we're tense, we're just like that balled up fist. And that fist can't do much by itself except if you're a boxer, okay, but I don't think many of us are. If we want to use that hand for something functional, we need to relax it and make it useful and make it part of our body that's going to help us. So the same thing happens with the mind. If our mind gets all balled up and full of tension, it's going to work against us. It's not going to be an ally in our mission to get what we need to get done. And again, in very stressful times, it happens automatically. It happens out of our awareness. And if we can start being more aware of when we get stressed, then we can overcome it and work with ways. Some people get stressed in their neck. Some people say, okay, my neck's been bothering me for a while. My challenge for you is it's probably a stress reaction. And if you learn that when your neck gets stressed, it gets tense, you might be stressful, you might be stressing out. And that's a time to try this technique. Some people get like a stomach, tenseness. Some people get headaches. Whatever it may be, we manifest stress in different ways. But if we start becoming aware of who we are and what our body's all about, then we can effectively overcome a lot of that and again, avoid the potential, pitfalls down the road. So breathing and meditation are really important. Mindfulness is very important, and try to help people and try to help ourselves just deal with this, okay? So I hope that was helpful in the respect of some techniques that we can use. The other things, are just ways of structuring our day, okay? And I mentioned the word boundaries earlier in my talk to you. Boundaries are very helpful in helping us organize our world, okay? And again, a lot of times when we're on our normal day-to-day, boundaries just happen and they exist, from our home is different than our office is different than being in the car, is different than whatever. But right now, a lot of us have a confusion of what those boundaries are. Again, working from home, unless we have a very dedicated home office that no one else goes into but us during the working hours of the day, things get a little confusing, especially if we have children or family members at home, and while we're in our office, a knock on a door or a barging in of mommy, daddy, or whatever, can you help me? I need some help. And it interferes with all that. So setting up boundaries in our world is going to help help deal with the levels of stress too. The clearer what we do, when we do it, and where we are, helps us move forward. It helps us cope with this uncertainty. And again, the uncertainty of the pandemic now becomes the uncertainty of our lives. Okay. Some people need routine. Some people thrive on the routine of what their lives were like before the COVID-19 impact, and now that routine has been totally thrown upside down. So what we try to do is kind of instruct you to kind of reassess your environment, reassess what you've been doing for the several weeks that you've been working remotely, and is it working effectively for you? Is my dining room table a really good place to have my home office? Because when I shut down, my office is still where I'm eating my dinner or my lunch or my breakfast. And that confusion, again, creates stress. And it never lets us disconnect from our work life. And that's where I hear a lot of people working harder than ever, is that they haven't, and some people don't have the luxury, but some people, haven't put their thought into the placement of their work world inside their homes, and how that impacts their non-work world. And so I want you to think about that and think about how you're set up to work remotely, and if you can, maybe configure things a little differently so that you can increase the distance, both physical and emotional, from your work life and your personal life. Because if we don't have time to, disconnect from work, we're going to continue to, feel more stressed, and the negative impact of that can be very, very detrimental. So looking at your home environment and spacing things out, and I think that for many people, it's been a challenge. Like I said, again, one of the more creative ones I heard in the past was, people have a balcony home office now, which was, I think, a lovely thing. So they're at work overlooking the ocean from their home, or the bay in Biscayne. But that took some work, because up until that point, they were still having all the intrusions of their home life right in the middle of their work life. And then again, when do you shut down, and when do you say time out? When do you say my workday is over? Now, again, I understand the practice of law and criminal law sometimes has a 24/7 clock going on. We all know that, and in some respects, our lives do here at FLA. But there has to be time where you can get away from it all, where you can take a moment or hour or even longer to just say, I need to be away from the demands of my job. One of the things that I found most striking about lawyers in particular is that the identity of being a lawyer is first and foremost as they describe who they are to somebody they just meet, or in general. Tell me about you, and the first thing is, well, I'm a lawyer. Well, okay, and that seems to have a lasting impact on people's identity, because when we're not able to practice law, or when we're practicing law in a different way, it's hard to readjust how we deal with our world. I'm going to challenge all of you to maybe replace that number one description of who you are by saying, I am so-and-so human being, or I'm so-and-so mom or dad or brother or sister, uncle, aunt, whatever. That your first identity is not your profession, is not your title. And that takes a lot of doing, because we work hard to get where we are. And a lot of our days are consumed with that identity. But it's got to be put in its place to where it's not just all you are, and it becomes the most prominent who you are. And I've been challenged time and time again with that concept. Well, what do you mean? I work 20 hours a day, and I'm sleep 5 hours, and so most of me is being a lawyer. Well, first of all, working 20 hours a day, we have to have a different discussion. Number two, yes, we understand how important it is, but if that's how you identify yourself all the time, then what do you do when you're not? And where are you available to other people in your life? If you have friends, family, significant others, they don't look at you as John Smith or Mary Smith lawyer. They look at you as John Smith, Mary Smith, person in my life, mother, father, sister, brother, friend. And if we can't turn that off, it has an impact on our lives that is potentially very negative. Okay, not to say we shouldn't be proud of being what we are. Okay, being proud as a professional that you become and work hard to become is absolutely wonderful, but it ought not to be the reason for your existence and the reason we work. And again, in this time, this is not a pandemic that only affected lawyers, and lawyers' lives are upside down. It's affected people's lives, and it's affected us on ways that we're not going to be able to handle just because we're lawyers or psychologists in this case. It's going to be a way we're going to have to deal with it in a human way, because this is a human experience. This is not a legal thing that came down from the Supreme Court and said, okay, from now on, COVID-19 is a legal issue that we have to deal with as lawyers. It's a human issue. It's an issue that threatens people's lives. It's an issue that, again, is uncertain, and uncertainty is not a legal thing. It's a person thing. So I behoove you to check that identity issue at the door, especially in one of the doors in your house. Walk into another part of your house and say, okay, right now, I am no longer the lawyer. I am the father, the son, the mother, the sister, the individual who has a special person that I haven't seen because of the virus, but we talk to each other every day on the computer or by phone, and I can't wait to, to say hello to that person, or dare I say hug that person again in the future. So that's not the lawyer talking, that's the human being talking. And my job is to help you accept being that human being. And that's an important thing to do. Molly, you're raising the thing.
Yes, Dr. Weinstein, I wanted to add two things to address another question that we received. That one related more to the drinking issue. But I first wanted to add, when we're talking about practical tips and ways to deal with stress and anxiety, as you were just mentioning, so often, lawyers, our identity is being a lawyer, not being a parent. And if you ask someone, if especially a young attorney, tell me about yourself, the first thing they'll say is, I'm a lawyer, not I live in Naples, or I live in Miami, or I'm a really good cook, or I'm a lawyer. Right. And I think that's the case in several other professions as well. I don't know them as well, but one of the traits that comes along with being a lawyer, and Dr. Weinstein and I have seen this so much, especially over these past couple months. Attorneys, we are the ones, so often we are the ones with the answers. People that, those of you that are in the defense bar, we clients look to you for what is the answer. If we have any prosecutors on the call as well, which I think we probably have a few, it's victims that, how is this case going to proceed? And, or, even if in these civil fields, opposing counsel and clients, and so often, our lives are set by, statutes and rules and case law, and people come to us for the answers. And this is one of the first times in many of our lives where, with respect to certain issues, we do not have the answers. We don't know when the case will proceed. And, speedy trials have been told until this long, or, a victim is, I'm afraid to come to court to testify because I don't want to get sick. Oh, court is closed. I don't know how to use Zoom. I don't know how to, so I think I think there's the added stress of not being, of ourselves as practitioners, simply not knowing. And I encourage you all, and I think Dr. Weinstein can speak a little bit more to this, is to just, of course, we all are going to practice law ethically. That is what we do, but to let yourself off the hook when you can for not knowing all the answers. And answers not just from our clients, from our own family members. When are you going back to work? Or when is this going to end? When am I going to be able to go back to school? Again, this is we're human beings. And I think that's something that can cause a lot of anxiety. It's just not the fear of the unknown and unanswered, living with the unanswered questions. That's very, very difficult. And one of the things that has really helped a lot of the folks that we've been working with is connection, that human connection. So this is in terms of a practical tip. And this is a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think everybody is a little zoomed out in many ways. But one of the, in some of the offices, the attorneys that we've worked with, they have lunch together on Zoom, or they'll even have happy hour together on Zoom. Again, so it's a way to stay connected, because so often, that's where we do let off a lot of that steam. I think, especially in the defense bar, I know a lot of you are probably solo practitioners and are in an office by yourselves or sharing office space, so that might not be quite as relevant. But the importance of connection and dealing with some of these unanswered questions together. And that has really worked for a lot of the folks that we've been sort of checking in with over these past couple of months, actually since March. It's just the importance of, you know, at first we thought, okay, this is just going to last for a couple of weeks and then we'll all be back at work. And then we didn't know. So just that the importance of connection, whether it's with your coworkers or, you know, even calling one of us. But with respect to connection also, it's the, I know a lot of people, I don't know if we have anyone on here from the Public Defender's Office or State Attorney's Office here in Miami, but that's, and hopefully we have folks from all around the state, but we also have dealt with pretty severe isolation with young attorneys who have, you know, maybe moved here from another state for a job, particularly in one of the large state attorney's offices, and may not have any family here and may not have that connection that they would often get at work. And I know for me, when I first started practicing law in Chicago, most of my life had to do with people that I worked with. So missing that connection, I mean, it's just really important to keep that connection, and that will necessarily help alleviate some of the anxiety and some of the unknowns where, you know, let me ask you a question. I don't know either. I just, you know, and let's just figure this out together and we will take it a day at a time. But I just wanted to add that, just the importance of connection in alleviating stress and anxiety and depression. I mean, isolation, we're in the midst of a global crisis. And so I think all of the things that we knew and all of the tools that we were used to going to, I mean, I think gyms are slowly starting to open back up, but you know, running, doing, going to visit grandchildren, I mean, things that were our normal go-tos for making us feel better and being able to separate from work or talk about, you know, or collaborate with people, we don't have those available to us. So just trying to keep connection in any way that you can. And the other thing I wanted to add, and if you wanted to talk more about that connection, Dr. Weinstein, you know, please do, because I think you can speak to it as well. The other thing I wanted to add, one of the questions that we got had to do with drinking in particular. And so often, you know, I have been, you know, I haven't drank in more than a decade, and that's not something that's a viable stress relief for me anymore. But for many people it is. You know, most people are not, you know, many people are not alcoholics and have a glass of wine. And the particular question that we got had to do with, you know, before I used to go to work and come and perhaps have a glass of wine with dinner. But people are working from home, and the question addressed, you know, how do I avoid falling into that trap of it's 5 o'clock somewhere? And I think that's a really good question, because that is, whether it's drinking or, you know, eating ice cream or doing too much Amazon shopping, anything that we can possibly be afflicted with, if not done, you know, carefully, I think that's a really good question. So I'm glad that the person asked that question. And I think avoiding falling into that trap is probably similar to what Dr. Weinstein was talking about before in terms of boundaries, you know, to having a glass of wine in the evening, make sure it's the evening. You know, set your schedule, find other things to do. I know that when I first entered into the world of recovery, I didn't know what it was like to go to work, and I didn't know what people did after work if they didn't drink. So I had to set up a new normal for myself in terms of, okay, this is what I'll do. And I think the same thing goes for a lot of us now, is that, you know, okay, even if, you know, maybe I'm thinking about, maybe now would be a good time for a drink. Well, let's take a step back and think of some alternatives. And I think that awareness, even just by virtue of asking the question, awareness is 50% of the fight here. If there's a concern about falling into that trap, the fact that you're aware of it is a really good thing. And then just, you know, look for, okay, maybe I'll do this instead. And then So I wanted to address that question because I think it's a really important one. And I think it's important in terms of, especially when we're dealing with anxiety and depression. I say this to law students a lot. You know, when you're in law school, you know, nothing to do with the pandemic, start looking at how you handle so it doesn't become a pattern, so you don't fall into a trap. When you're studying for finals, when you're done with your finals, look at how you celebrate, look at your patterns, look at your, so it doesn't become a bigger issue. And I think the same thing can go for right now. You know, look at some of these new techniques that we have to pick up, and look at some of the alternatives so we don't fall into that trap. But I wanted, you know, to applaud anyone for, you know, really the awareness is half of the battle. So I wanted to address that question. I'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Weinstein, and thank you.
Well, and I think the question does lend itself to the idea, and you said, Molly, the awareness issue is mindfulness in practice. Awareness and mindfulness are synonymous. So if you're aware that you're starting to get, you know, the feelings and the thoughts about drinking, then you're able to, again, be in control and make the alternative decisions. And the boundaries and the connectiveness, they're interrelated. They may be on opposite ends of what we talk about in terms of socialization, but if we set clear boundaries, then we're open to more connection that is more positive and more effective. If boundaries get blurred, then everything gets jumbled, and suddenly what used to be a source of pleasure is confused with maybe sources that are not so much pleasure. You know, again, it's funny how our lives are very fluid. Being human is something that I know I've taken for granted, and I think we all do, but this is why I'm not a computer programmer or someone who works on machines, because machines are basically black and white, right and wrong, on and off kind of things. Humans are fluid. We have our whole range of being, or our emotional ranges are all fluid, and the way we interact with our world is fluid. Sometimes we find ourselves getting stuck and rigid, okay? One of the things that I love to talk about is I grew up, and I'll admit this openly, I was really a cartoon addict as a kid. And I watched all the cartoons growing up, and one of my favorites was Felix the Cat. And for those of you who may have heard of Felix the Cat, he was a very, very interesting character because he was very, very curious about his world, but in his curiosity, he would inevitably get into trouble. And because he didn't understand what boundaries were, now I know what that means nowadays, but I didn't understand it back then. He would just try different things and poke his nose or take a step someplace where he shouldn't have, and would find himself in the jackpot or in a dilemma. But he was fortunate enough to have what he called his bag of tricks. And it was something he carried around, and whenever he got into a problem, he'd reach into that bag of tricks and find a way to extricate himself from the problem. I think that it's a great metaphor for what we can do in terms of building up our resiliency, which is a new term that we're talking about in terms of overcoming things. But a lot of us have reduced our bag of tricks to one or two go-tos over the years. We've relied on these two things, or even sometimes one thing that really gets us through. But what happens when those one or two or three things stop working? If we don't have a fallback or two in our bag, then we're setting ourselves up for potential difficulty. Now, this pandemic has challenged all of us to look into our bag of tricks and say, okay, this has worked for this has worked for the hurricanes, but this is not a hurricane, so it's not working so much for that. This has worked because, okay, maybe we had a power failure, or we had the need to work from home for a while, but now we're working from home for a long time. And our children are now schooling from home forever. And our significant others are doing the same thing in the same place. Or I'm stuck at home and my significant other adult is out and I'm left holding the bag with the whole household. Okay, those solutions probably have not been in our bag of tricks for a long time, if forever. So again, the challenge is how do we build up our skills and our tools so that we are now facing something that we haven't faced before. And again, The connectiveness issue. Staying connected is a whole new thing now. We thought nothing of driving over to mom and dad's house or grandma and grandma's house, or having people knock on our door and having a party or a get together. Neighbors, for those of you who are fortunate enough to have good neighbors, would get together, but we're not doing that right now. And if we're doing it, it's very, very different than what we used to do. So the challenge is for us to think outside our proverbial boxes, to take a look at our bag of tricks, to take an inventory of that bag, and to see what we have, what's worked, and suddenly what's not working anymore, and what can we add or even modify that we've already have in the bag to make things more effective and make our lives more manageable. And that's going to be a challenge that's going to be with us for a while. And I think one of the wonderful outcomes of this process will be that after it's all said and done, we'll have a much more robust bag of tricks at our beck and call. And that's a wonderful takeaway. That could be something that is, and again, it's only ours. What works for me is not going to work for Molly all the time, and vice versa. So we need to find out what works for us, okay? And working for us means understanding us. And that's another piece that I've taken away from all this, is that this has been an opportunity for us to really reflect on who we are and what we are. And I'm going to encourage you to do that, okay? Encourage you to know what makes you tick, what makes you smile, what makes you laugh, what makes you cry, and what makes you angry, and really take a look at all those features of yourselves, and try to reconnect with that, because a lot of times we shut that stuff off. We just kind of go on automatic, and our days just go, and our practices continue, and the calls come in, we meet with the clients, we go to trial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have dinner, we don't have dinner, we go to church, we don't go to church, but things have changed. And again, the challenge to deal with change is one that is monumental. I'm sure you've heard people say, I love change. Every day is a new day and bring it on, and I can't wait for it. But you know what I found over the many years of practicing what I practice, change is terrifying to the majority of us. We love the familiar, and we love what we do in the comfort of the familiarity, okay? And when someone says, well, change, we say, oh yeah, bring it on, until we figure out that's not so comfortable. So we inevitably fall back into our old patterns and our old ways of dealing with things. But we've been asked to change. We've been asked to look at our lives in a very different way, because this thing called the COVID-19 virus, or novel COVID-19 virus, as they call it, this horrible thing that's happening to most of us, has called upon us to do something we haven't been called upon to do, if ever, okay? And again, doing that is going to require a lot of getting to know ourselves and reacquaint ourselves with ourselves. And that sounds kind of weird, but it's really important to get to know ourselves, okay? It's just gonna be a lot better if we do that and understand that this has really affected us in ways we had no idea could affect us. So. All right, that being said, I guess we're getting close to the end. Are there any other questions that came in through the Wayback Machine or wherever they come in through?
Not at this juncture.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to leave you with something that I've done before. And, it's the concept of what I call a recipe of humble pie, okay? And this is something I came across as I was exploring what it is that we could present to professionals of any kind. And this was something that was actually presented to me through a physician presentation, where physicians are often confuse themselves with being gods, okay? And there was an actual movie where there was a great scene, and I can't remember the name of the movie, but there was a whole interaction about a doctor who really held himself up as God and being challenged for that. At the end of the scene, he said, if you're in the operation room and I'm standing over you, you better think that I'm your God. And that just left an impression on me. And to talk about, sometimes we get very, very full of ourselves, and we lose the ability to connect with other people. And sometimes our clients need us to sort of put ourselves in their shoes. So the concept of humble pie, for me, is something that I take very seriously because, as Molly said before, and for all of us, we don't always have the answers, okay? And it's got to be okay not to have an answer from time to time, okay? It's got to be something that we move from the most completely uncomfortable experience to, yeah, it's okay. And if we don't have the answer right now, we'll get it somehow, or at least attempt to find an answer to it. So humble pie really asks us to accept, again, I'm going back to the beginning, being human and being imperfect. Now, I'm going to just take a little sidestep. The concept of perfection, okay? I hope no one in this room sets themselves up for the pursuit of perfection because we have finally determined that perfection is unattainable, okay? And it sets us up for nothing but frustration and aggravation because if you set yourself up for something that you can't ever reach, then you're going to be ultimately very unhappy. So the humble pie concept comes with the understanding that perfection is not a goal, and the pursuit of perfection is not a process that I encourage anyone to pursue. It's the pursuit of betterment. It's the pursuit of being the best you can be, and again, wait for it, in the moment. Okay, so I'm going to throw all these concepts together. Pursuing the best me I can be in the moment. So we're holding on to that mindfulness concept. We're working on the idea that we have something that's attainable because I can only be the best me. Molly can't be the best me, and I can't be the best Molly. Okay, I can only be the best me. And there are other psychologists, I can't be the best them, and vice versa. As an attorney, the person, we're talking about the person now, not just the lawyer. Be the best you can be, and along with that comes the understanding that you don't have all the answers all the time. Okay, so if you'll indulge me for a moment more, okay, if we talk about a filling of a humble pie, such that we're looking at our lives, we have things that are using equal parts of our computer crashing and the data being lost, adding to that forgetting something, which is always a sin, we know, and then perhaps failing to show up on time for someone or something, and dare I say, then break a promise, and you sprinkle all that together with a dash of bad luck and stir well. Okay, so you put that part of the filling aside for a moment and just work with me here, okay? In a separate bowl, I want you to try adding one unhappy client or coworker or supervisor, okay? And then this is the one that's going to be the hardest, being wrong about something. Then you add to that being schooled by one of your peers. Then you have not being able to prove something, which that's another challenge for all of us. And then finally, really screwing up and making a bad choice, okay? So those are your fillings for your humble pie, okay? And don't forget to stir well, because they have to get together and mix well, okay? So you put the two batches together and you add the secret ingredient. Losing someone either through a social media dispute or something else, an argument, and by the way, that really kind of makes the filling stick together, okay? And as we move along for this recipe, and I think you're getting a sense of where I'm going with this, you have to have a good topping for any kind of pie. And humble pie requires the proper topping. So what you put on the topping is you're mixing a heaping teaspoonful of realization with someone showing you grace, and then you sprinkle that on top. And grace is something that is really lost in translation in a lot of us. Grace makes this go down a lot easier, okay? And then of course, you let it sit overnight. Okay, what you don't do is you react by pushing the send button on a very, very angry email that you have been putting together for the last hour and a half. Let it sit, okay? And then you try to, a little bit, maybe a side of failure, and you put it all together with the topping, okay? And I can tell you that the humble pie that you've created will help you just kind of realize that life has meaning beyond just getting things done and proving a point and winning or losing, okay? Now, this may come as a surprise to you, but you're probably not gonna like it the first couple of times you try it, okay? I can assure you though, if you work at this, you're gonna find out that life is sweet and bittersweet and sometimes very sour, and all those parts of life are to be appreciated, and embraced. Okay. And so this humble pie doesn't have any age limit. Okay, it works for young and old. Okay, and as you start to enjoy the humble pie that you've made, and you can tweak the recipe however you feel, however you see fit. Okay, ideally, you'll come to appreciate the limits of your abilities. Okay, and understand how important it is to know that we have limitations, no matter how wonderful and what kind of superstar we become in our own minds or to the community at large. Okay, but then what it'll do, it'll open up a whole nother avenue of maybe how you deal with your clients. And you've been working a certain way, and maybe with this humble pie inside you, you might start hearing clients speak to you in ways you maybe never have heard before, or maybe just a nuance that you pick up that you may not have picked up before. And it's going to better you as an attorney and better you as a person and as a judge and whoever else may be listening to this presentation, but mostly as a person. Okay. Again, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to finish up and just let you know that it's going to take time. Okay, and it's something that's going to build. And if you work at this, just like the exercises I told you about earlier on in the presentation, you can really master the recipe. Again, not perfect it, because there's always going to be something else that you may add or even take out as your world continues to go on. But remember, it's going to be your recipe that works for you. And again, I really love that analogy. I hope one or two of you did too, because I think it's something that's worthwhile. And if we can really look at ourselves as just a person trying to be the best person they can be in the moment to do the best job we're called upon. I can't think of anything more we can ask for ourselves than that. So, Molly, you wanted to add something at the end?
Oh, I just wanted to say in closing, it's almost 1:30, and I wanted to ask. Oh, that's Dr. Weinstein, Rocky, who has joined us. I just wanted to encourage all of you, as I said, at the beginning of the 12 o'clock hour, that if anyone is struggling at all, or if any of your colleagues are, to feel free to reach out to us. It's free, it's confidential, and as I said before, it can even be anonymous. We've even had folks call us and say, I don't want to say who I am, but I'm really struggling with this. So I want you to see our faces and know that we are a friendly, safe place for people to go. And then I wanted to ask you, Dr. Weinstein, since we're going to be checking back in with folks in a couple of weeks, do you have any homework for anyone in terms of how to take care of themselves?
Okay,
The assignments. A
moment ago, because the bird was too loud, but if you can you hear me at this point?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good. Well, I'd love to hear how your recipes have come along. That would be one assignment, and I would really hope that you can take just really jump into that and see it could be fun. It really can. The other thing is, if there's anything we haven't addressed, bring it back to us. And if you're able to do the relaxation and the mindfulness work, let us know how it's worked for you and maybe where you applied it. And those that's enough assignments for the week. Just give yourself, again, the most important thing is be good to yourselves. Okay. Find your skin crawling, or you find your hair in the back of your neck standing up. Take some breaths, relax, and just be good to yourself, because these are times that we've never ever been through.
Oh, from our criminal law section, and our chair-elect Warren Lindsay is one of our participants today. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Dr. Weinstein. By the way, I think you were talking about Alec Baldwin in Malice. I think it was operating room number 2.
Thank you.
Don't quote me.
That's it.
we hope this helped. It was intended, obviously, as a voluntary public informational session. I've heard from a couple dear friends of mine saying, hey, listen, everyone can see one another on the participant list, and they're absolutely correct. This was not intended as a individualized, private, therapeutic session. It's in that spirit that we appreciated and understood that everyone was going to be able to see each other in the participant list on this voluntary public fireside chat. The email link from Jenny is coming soon. It's going to have the link to the video, the recording of this. It's going to have your CLE certificate for course number 3980, so you can get your credits for it. We'll let you know when part 2 of our fireside chat is going to be set, probably the 3rd week of June. We're still trying to figure out, instead of the live annual meeting, how much remote annual meetings are going to be going on in the middle of June. Coming up a week from today, May 28th at 3 in the afternoon, 3 to 4:30, we've got some experts from Squire Patton Boggs all over the country. They're going to talk about CARES Act funding, not only getting it, but the federal oversight for what happens when you receive these fundings, theories of prosecution for people who go astray, and theories of defense for folks who find themselves in harm's way. Then on June 4th at noon, our current chair, Jennifer Sedalis, begins our Experts on Advocacy series with the storyboard, putting your case together for the courtroom. So that'll kick off that series. And then coming later in June and July, our Changing State Landscape with public defenders, prosecutors, and regional counsel from all across the state. Dennis DeVlaming from Clearwater, his just recorded 3.113 compliance CLE for Discovery, Brady, and Giglio. That'll be up on our site soon, and we'll let you know when that's getting posted. And this wellness check-in, and then live programming, we hope, is going to start in October. So, Florida Bar, CLS.org. Join the section if you're not a member. Email us to get involved if you are a member. Make a difference. How a society treats its outcasts says perhaps the most about the type of society that we are and yearn to become. Keep on keeping safe. Thanks for being here today. Thanks to our very special guests, and we'll see you soon. Take good care.